Today, I want to talk about something that nearly broke LinkedIn last week. And not because the topic was controversial for the sake of it, and not because I was trying to generate a reaction, but because a single observation, one that I genuinely believe reached over 12,500 people and it generated 48 comments and prompted some of the most substantive conversations that I've had on LinkedIn in years. And this is the observation. The observation is the UK has a leadership problem that nobody wants to admit. We are promoting people into environments that the human nervous system was never designed to operate in. Times of constant uncertainty, constant change, constant urgency, constant visibility and availability. And then we wonder why decision-making slows down. Trust disappears. Teams become politically careful and leaders become emotionally exhausted. And the comments that came back were extraordinary. Some people agreed immediately. Some challenged the neuroscience. Some pushed back on the role of horses altogether. And some said quite simply, at last, someone who gets it. So today's episode is the conversation that the post started. Because what the comments revealed is that this is not just a topic that resonates. It's that most organizations are sitting on a leadership crisis, and yet they've not been honest enough to name it. So welcome to this week's issue of Impactful Teamwork. And I'm Julia Felton, the founder of Business Horsepower. And what I'm proud to say that we do in this podcast is we explore what genuine teamship actually looks like. Not the version on social media, on the internet, but the version that actually drives commercial results, retains good people, and allows leaders to lead without carrying everything themselves. So when I'm talking about that LinkedIn post, let me be really precise about what the post was actually saying, because several commentators engaged with the surfaced argument rather than the one beneath it. And what I was saying in that post is not that human beings can't handle pressure. Humans are exquisitely designed to handle pressure in the short term for a defined period under a specific threat and with a clear resolution in sight. In that situation, the human nervous system is one of the most sophisticated performance tools in existence. The problem is the issue that we're seeing is chronic, unrelenting, unresolvable pressure with no off switch. And this is a very different condition entirely. And it's one, I think, that describes the daily experience that most senior leadership teams in the UK are experiencing right now. And one commentator, Richard Perry, I hope he doesn't mind me citing him, put it simply when he said, "We need to understand our biology as the basis of high performance." And he is right. And yet most leadership development programs still treat the body as irrelevant. We work from the neck up. We produce better thinking without producing better regulation. And then everyone's surprised when the better thinking does not translate into better behavior under pressure. Because under pressure, we tend to default back to our normal behavior. Another commentator, Andy, made a sophisticated challenge that I want to address directly. He argued the problem wasn't the nervous system itself, but the fact that its natural responses are suppressed and left unresolved in organizations. Policies, performance management processes, professional norms, all of these actively prevent people from expressing the very kind of emotions that signal something important is happening. And the result isn't resilience, it's a kind of low-level numbness that masquerades as professionalism. And I think actually what we are both describing, myself and Andy, are different aspects of the same problem. The environment is dysregulating. The cultural response to that dysregulation is to suppress it rather than address it. And so what you end up with is a leadership team that looks composed on the outside and is running on fumes underneath. And this is not leadership fatigue as a personal failing, it's an organizational system producing a predictable outcome. So why is AI not the answer to this problem? Because AI is the elephant in the boardroom right now. It's dominating every leadership conversation, every conference agenda, every investment discussion. And I want to be clear. I'm not dismissing its significance. The disruption AI is causing to knowledge workers, to the information advantage, to the economies of decision making is real, and it is accelerating each and every day. But there is a pattern I keep seeing in organizations, and this is what concerns me. Organizations are investing heavily in AI capability, whilst the human infrastructure required to use that capability is quietly deteriorating. You can give a fragmented, politically carefully, trust deficit leadership team the most sophisticated AI tools on the market. But what you'll get is a fragmented, politically careful, trust deficit leadership team making faster decisions. The quality of those decisions doesn't improve because the quality of the team making them hasn't improved. So this is the classic example of garbage in, garbage out. So AI isn't going to solve the problems when we have a trust deficit in an organization, when we have poor leadership. AI isn't going to solve those problems. And the research here is very compelling. Less than 13% of team members across the world are fully engaged at work, according to the Gallup statistics. And 86% of business failures are attributable to silo mentality and poor collaboration, not to technical failure, not to market conditions, but to the way people work or fail to work together. These numbers predicate the current AI acceleration, so they're not getting better on their own. So what AI can't do, and this is the point the post was making obliquely, is it can't read the room. AI at the moment doesn't yet have empathy. It doesn't have the ability to read what is actually going on. It can't sense that there's a reason that your team is agreeing with the strategy in the meeting because some of the team members don't feel safe enough to challenge it. It can't notice that your highest performer has been incrementally withdrawing for weeks, and it can't detect the quality of trust in a group or the cost of its absence. And that's not a gap in the technology, it's a gap in what technology can ever do, because these are fundamentally relational, embodied phenomena. And it's precisely where the work that we do with horses becomes not a curiosity, but a competitive necessity. So there are a number of people on the post that I want to address specifically, and they were the people that were very skeptical about how the horses might be able to help in this regard. And this is something that comes up time and time again when I speak with prospects about this work and anyone that's new to the work. And I totally understand why people might be skeptical about this. In fact, I'd just like to cite one particular comment from somebody called Murph, who argued that horses are hierarchical herd animals, and what they demonstrate is nonverbal communication, not leadership in the human sense. And he's obviously factually correct that horses and humans are very different species with different social structures. But I think that the argument misses the point that horses are actually partners in this work. And we're not asking the horses to teach leadership theory. What we're asking them to be is a mirror to provide immediate, honest, unedited feedback on what's actually happening in the room. And specifically, the quality of presence, the coherence between intention and behavior, and the degree of relational trust between people. Another gentleman, Anthony, a commentator whose observations I thought were perhaps one of the most incisive in the thread, described it beautifully when he wrote that the horse is reading the person, not listening to what they say, not interpreting what they think they're projecting, but responding to something the person cannot edit, cannot rehearse, and probably cannot see in themselves. And he is right. And he identified the precise reason why no questionnaires, no 360-degree feedback process, and no leadership assessment tool can really replicate what happens out in the field. So let me give you a concrete example of this from my work. Because I recently had a client working with one of my horses. The horse was working at liberty with no lead rope, no halter, just in an open space in the arena. And my client asked the horse to walk with her. And the horse just stood and refused to move. Nothing dramatic. It was just quiet. It was very definitive that they were not interested. And I coached her. I asked her what was going on in the moment. And what she admitted was that she had no clarity in that moment, because what was going on underneath the surface was that she had two competing professional paths going on, whether to continue working with her employer or whether to set up her own business. And she couldn't choose which one to do. And she had been carrying that indecision for months without sharing it with anyone. And what the horse had effectively done was externalized what she'd been holding on to invisibly. And of course, once it was visible and once it was named and in the room, we could actually work with it. So when we partner with the horses, it's not a soft outcome, because the cost of that senior leader carrying that unresolved decision into every meeting, into every stakeholder conversation, and every team interaction for months and months actually translates into a higher commercial cost for the business. It's just it doesn't appear on the balance sheet. So what do the horses provide? They're not just a metaphor, they actually provide a diagnostic. And what makes this diagnostic uniquely valuable is the instant, and it can't be managed, and it reveals the gap between the leader people think they are and the leader they actually are in any moment, in any pressurized situation. And so there were also some other comments on the post, which created a really interesting thread about the deeper question about what is leadership actually for. And Tina argued that the problem was not the quality of leadership, but our assumption about what leadership is. And Aziz asked whether leadership's fundamental problem is that it doesn't know when to refresh itself. And these aren't peripheral questions. These are questions that determine whether any investment in leadership development actually lands and ultimately actually delivers an ROI for the client. So let me share my position on this. And this is the foundation of the Unbridled Teamship roadmap. It's that the dominant model of leadership that exists today was one built for a different era. And it assumes that the leader at the top holds all the relevant information, makes the most important decisions, and carries the accountability for all the outcomes. And that's a model of leadership that worked in a stable, slow-moving environment. It was a model of leadership that worked pre-internet days. But right now, this model is no longer fit for purpose, because the environment today requires most organizations and people to operate at a fast pace, in uncertainty, and we require people to have continuous adaptation to what's going on. That's a very different environment to the environment that many of the management models were designed to cope with. So what replaces this is not the absence of leadership, but actually distributed leadership, shared leadership that I talk about a lot. Leadership that rotates based on what is required in the moment, not based on who has the title. Leadership that is held by the team as a whole and not carried by one person at the top. And this is a model of leadership that horse herds have been operating on exactly for millions of years. Because in the horse herd, different herd members lead from the front, the side, and behind, depending on what the situation demands. The herd doesn't debate who's in charge. It responds fully to what is needed. And the outcome is a collective that can navigate genuine uncertainty at speed without a single point of failure. And what I see in leadership teams that I work with is that leaders who are the most fatigued are the ones who are carrying more than their fair share of the thinking, the deciding, and the risk. Their teams are capable, often highly capable actually, but they're waiting to be told rather than stepping up to contribute. And one of the reasons that they're waiting is usually not their capability. It's often a lack of trust and a lack of psychological safety. It's this lack of trust that stepping up will be safe. And also the leader often doesn't fully trust the team to step up without micromanaging them. So this is one of the dynamics that the horses make visible faster than anything else I know. And it's the dynamic the Unbridled Teamship roadmap is designed to shift permanently. There was also another aspect to the post that I think was really interesting, which was the one about pressure being part of leadership and the ability of leaders to remain calm and think clearly and make good decisions under pressure. And I think that's true. I think that leaders do need to be able to learn to do that. And what is also interesting is that even though we can learn it, when we are under pressure, people tend to default to their natural behavior. So the other thing I'd say about a leader performing under pressure is that a leader performing under pressure isn't the same as building a team that performs under pressure collectively well. Because an individual leader who's developed their own capacity for regulation is valuable. But the team that's developed a shared capacity where one person's steadiness genuinely anchors the others, and where trust is deep enough and honest conversations happen even when the stakes are high, that's something very different, and that is a lot rarer. And this is really what we are seeking to create with the Unbridled Teamship model, is this collective accountability and responsibility and shared leadership within the team, rather than everything relied on by the leader. So the question you really want to ask yourself is not whether you can handle the pressure. I'm sure you can, or you wouldn't be in the role that you're in. The question is whether your team can, and whether the way that you're currently leading is building that capacity, or are you quietly eroding it by doing the team's thinking for them. So if what I've described today sounds familiar, and if you recognize the pattern of a capable team that's not yet fully stepping up, a leader who's carrying more than they should, a culture where the conversations that matter most are not quite happening, I want to invite you to do something really practical. I'd like to invite you to take the Turbocharge Your Team audit. It's available at businesshorsepower.com/quiz. It takes less than 5 minutes. It's just 12 questions. And it's really going to give you a clear picture of where your team is beginning to fall down. Is it in terms of game-changing trust, impactful contribution, or unbridled adaptability? And so you can see specifically what's holding you back from operating at the level that your team is capable of leading at. And once you've done that, please book a complimentary review call with me, not a sales call, a genuine conversation about what you're seeing in your team and what's possible. Because the leadership problems nobody wants to admit is not somebody else's problem. It's the gap between the team that you have right now and the team that you know is possible. And that gap is closable. I've seen it close, and it starts with an honest look at where you actually are. So thanks for listening to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork, a slightly different perspective today. And I'd really like to thank everyone for jumping in and contributing to the conversation on LinkedIn. We post every single day on LinkedIn, and we also have a newsletter over there called Reinventing Leadership Teams. So please sign up for that. And if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do, because I'd love to keep these conversations going, because I think they are so valuable. And these are topics that we really need to be talking about in business today. So have an amazing week. And until next time, bye-bye.